In the frost-laden winter of 1818, within the stone walls of Ashford Manor, a man who had once believed in love now lived as its prisoner. Adrian Blackwood, Duke of Ashford, had locked his heart away 3 years prior, burying it alongside the wife who had betrayed him in the cruelest fashion imaginable. He had sworn an oath upon her grave. Never again would he allow sentiment to cloud his judgment. Never again would he trust a woman's gentle words. Yet fate, with its peculiar sense of irony, was about to send him a governess whose quiet compassion would prove more dangerous to his carefully constructed walls than any grand declaration of affection ever could. What he did not know was that Miss Clara Whitmore carried her own scars, and that their collision would ignite a transformation neither could have anticipated. If you are listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments from which part of the world you are listening to this story. I want to know how far it has traveled. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Ashford Manor like a shroud, obscuring the ancient oaks that lined the gravel drive. Inside the grand estate, Adrian Blackwood, the 6th Duke of Ashford, stood before the towering windows of his study, his silhouette rigid against the pale winter light. At 32, he possessed the bearing of a man who had inherited not just wealth and title, but the weight of generations. His dark hair, touched with premature silver at the temples, framed a face that might have been handsome had it not been set in such perpetual severity. His grey eyes, once warm, now held the coldness of granite. 3 years had passed since Isabel's death. 3 years since he had discovered the letters hidden in her escritoire, letters that revealed her affair with his closest friend, letters that spoke of plans to leave him, to take his fortune and his dignity. She had died before she could execute her betrayal, thrown from her horse during a reckless midnight ride to meet her lover. The scandal had been contained, the truth buried with her, but Adrian's capacity for trust had been interred as well. Now, Ashford Manor operated with the precision of a military campaign. Adrian had dismissed the warm, maternal governess who had cared for his daughter during Isabel's life, replacing her with a stern, elderly woman who valued discipline above all else. His daughter, 7-year-old Lily, had become as quiet as the portraits that lined the halls, her laughter a distant memory. The household staff moved through their duties with silent efficiency, careful never to disturb the Duke's solitude. Adrian's sister, Beatrice, had written to him weekly from London, pleading with him to soften, to remember that Lily needed a father, not a distant guardian. He had ignored her letters with the same cold determination he applied to everything. Love was a weakness, sentiment a liability. He would provide for his daughter's material needs, ensure she received the finest education, arrange an advantageous marriage when the time came. That was duty. Anything more was dangerous folly. On this particular morning, Adrian reviewed the household accounts with his steward, Mr. Pemberton, a thin man with spectacles that perpetually slid down his nose. The numbers were impeccable, as always. Ashford Manor ran at a profit, its farms productive, its investments sound. Adrian took satisfaction in this control, in the order he had imposed upon his domain. "Your Grace," Pemberton ventured carefully, "there is the matter of Miss Grimsby." Adrian's jaw tightened. Miss Grimsby, the governess, had submitted her resignation the previous week, citing her advanced age and a desire to retire to her sister's cottage in Bath. It was inconvenient, but Adrian had already instructed his London solicitor to find a replacement, someone equally stern, equally focused on discipline and academic rigor. "Has Mr. Thornton sent word regarding a suitable candidate?" Adrian asked, his tone clipped. "He has, Your Grace." However, Pemberton hesitated, adjusting his spectacles nervously. "Lady Beatrice has taken the liberty of recommending someone, a Miss Clara Whitmore, currently governess to the Ashworth family in Hampshire. Lady Beatrice speaks most highly of her character and suggests that Lady Lily might benefit from a gentler approach." Adrian's expression darkened. My sister oversteps her bounds. I will not have sentiment dictating the education of my daughter. Miss Grimsby's methods were sound. Forgive me, Your Grace, but Lady Lily has been rather withdrawn of late. Cook mentioned that the child barely touches her meals, and the upstairs maid reports that she often cries herself to sleep. Adrian turned sharply from the window, his eyes flashing with something that might have been pain before it was quickly suppressed. Children are resilient. Discipline builds character. I will not coddle her into weakness. Yet even as he spoke the words, a small voice within him whispered doubt. He had seen Lily only twice in the past month, both times briefly, in the formal drawing room where she had curtsied and answered his questions in monosyllables before being dismissed. She had Isabel's golden hair and delicate features, but her eyes, those were his own, grey and increasingly guarded. Your Grace, Pemberton pressed gently. Lady Beatrice has already invited Miss Whitmore to interview. She arrives this afternoon. Adrian's hands clenched behind his back. His sister's interference was intolerable, yet he could not deny her without causing a family rift that would only fuel London gossip. The Ton already whispered about the reclusive Duke of Ashford, about his cold treatment of his daughter, about the mysterious circumstances of his wife's death. Very well, he said at last, his voice like ice. I will interview this Miss Whitmore, but I make no promises. If she displays even a hint of the frivolous sentimentality that plagues most young women, she will be dismissed immediately. The afternoon brought with it a change in the weather. The mist lifted, revealing a landscape of frost-covered fields and bare trees etched against a pale sky. Adrian positioned himself in the library, a room designed to intimidate with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of leather-bound volumes and its massive mahogany desk. He would conduct this interview with the same ruthless efficiency he applied to business negotiations. At precisely 3 o'clock, Pemberton announced Miss Whitmore's arrival. Adrian did not rise from his chair, a deliberate display of authority. He expected to see what he always saw in women seeking positions in great houses, either desperate poverty barely concealed beneath false pride, or ambitious calculation masked by demure manners. What entered his library was neither. Miss Clara Whitmore was perhaps 26, dressed in a simple grey travelling dress that spoke of modest means but impeccable taste. Her chestnut hair was arranged in a neat chignon, and her posture conveyed quiet confidence rather than subservience. But it was her eyes that arrested him, warm hazel eyes that met his own directly, without either the flirtation he had learned to despise or the fear he had come to expect. There was intelligence in those eyes, and something else he could not quite name. Compassion, perhaps, or worse, understanding. She curtsied with perfect propriety. Your Grace, thank you for receiving me. Her voice was low and melodious, with the cultured accent of good breeding fallen on reduced circumstances. Adrian found himself momentarily disconcerted, then angry at his own reaction. He would not be swayed by a pleasant voice or a direct gaze. Miss Whitmore, he began coldly, my sister has taken it upon herself to recommend you, though I had already made arrangements for a replacement governess. Tell me why I should disrupt those plans. If his rudeness affected her, she gave no sign. Instead, she smiled slightly, a smile that somehow conveyed both respect and gentle amusement. Your Grace, I suspect you should not if your primary concern is maintaining the current atmosphere of your household. However, if your concern is for Lady Lily's well-being, then perhaps we might discuss what a child truly needs to flourish. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You presume to lecture me on my own daughter? Not at all, Your Grace. I presume only to offer my experience. I have been a governess for 8 years, to families of various temperaments and circumstances. I have learned that children, like plants, require more than structure to grow. They require light. The metaphor irritated him precisely because it resonated with the doubt he had been suppressing. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with the cold assessment he might give a horse at auction. And you believe yourself capable of providing this? Light? I believe every child deserves someone who sees them not as a duty to be managed, but as a soul to be nurtured. Lady Beatrice has told me something of Lady Lily's circumstances. A child who has lost her mother and finds her father distant will naturally retreat into herself. It is not weakness, Your Grace, it is self-preservation. The words struck too close to truths Adrian refused to acknowledge. His voice, when he spoke, was harsh. My daughter has every material advantage. She wants for nothing, except, perhaps, for affection. Clara's tone remained gentle, but her gaze was steady. Your Grace, I do not presume to know your heart or your history, but I do know children, and I know that a child raised without warmth becomes an adult incapable of giving it. Is that the future you wish for Lady Lily? For a long moment, silence filled the library. Adrian felt something crack within the fortress he had built around his emotions, and he resented this woman for causing it. Yet he could not deny the truth in her words. He thought of Lily's pale face, her listless responses, the way she flinched slightly whenever he entered a room. "What would you do differently, Miss Whitmore?" he asked at last, his tone still cold, but no longer dismissive. "I would begin by listening to her, by discovering what brings her joy, by reading with her, not just for education, but for the pleasure of stories, by walking with her in the gardens and teaching her the names of birds, by showing her that the world, despite its sorrows, still holds beauty worth embracing." Adrian stood abruptly, turning back to the window to hide the conflict in his expression. Everything in him wanted to reject this woman's philosophy, to cling to the cold certainty that had sustained him through 3 years of grief and rage. Yet a small, traitorous part of him wondered if he had been wrong, if in protecting himself from further pain he had inflicted it upon the one person who bore no blame for Isabel's betrayal. "You may have a trial period of 1 month, he said finally, his back still to her. "You will report to me weekly on Lady Lily's progress. You will maintain appropriate discipline and ensure her studies do not suffer. But," he paused, the words difficult to force out, "you may employ whatever methods you deem necessary to improve her spirits. If, at the end of the month, I see no improvement, you will be dismissed. Is that understood?" "Perfectly, Your Grace." There was warmth in her voice now, and something that might have been approval. "Thank you. I will not disappoint you." As she left the library, Adrian remained at the window, staring out at the frozen landscape. He told himself he had made a practical decision, nothing more. Yet he could not shake the feeling that Miss Clara Whitmore had just breached the first wall of his carefully constructed defences, and that his vow to never love again had just faced its first real challenge. Clara Whitmore's first weeks at Ashford Manor unfolded with a delicate precision that surprised even herself. She had expected resistance from Lady Lily, the sullen withdrawal of a child too wounded to trust. Instead, she found a little girl starving for affection who responded to kindness like a flower turning toward the sun. Within days, Lily's pale cheeks had gained colour. Within 2 weeks, the sound of her laughter, tentative at first, then genuine, echoed through the nursery corridors for the first time in years. Clara read to her each evening, not dry historical texts, but adventure stories that made Lily's eyes shine with wonder. They walked the frost-covered gardens, naming the winter birds that remained, robins, wrens, the occasional hawk circling overhead. Clara taught her to sketch, to press flowers between the pages of books, to find joy in small observations. Most importantly, she listened. She learned that Lily remembered her mother as a beautiful, distant figure who smelled of roses and rarely visited the nursery. She learned that the child blamed herself for her father's coldness, believing she had somehow failed to be worthy of his love. "Your father carries his own sorrows, darling," Clara told her gently one afternoon as they sat by the nursery fire. "Sometimes adults forget that children have feelings too, but that does not mean you are unloved." "Papa never smiles," Lily whispered, her small fingers clutching her doll. "Not ever. Miss Grimsby said it was because I was wicked. Clara's heart clenched with anger at the former governess's cruelty. You are not wicked, Lily. You are bright and kind and full of potential. Your father, he has forgotten how to show love, but that is his failing, not yours. The child looked up at her with those solemn grey eyes, so like the Duke's, and asked the question that would change everything. Will you teach him, Miss Clara? Like you teach me? Clara smiled sadly. Some lessons, my dear, can only be learned when a person is ready to learn them. Yet fate, it seemed, had other plans. The transformation in Lady Lily had not gone unnoticed. The household staff whispered approvingly about the new governess. Cook prepared Lily's favourite dishes and beamed when the child actually ate them. Even the stern butler, Mr. Hartley, was seen smiling when Lily curtsied to him in the hallway and wished him good morning. Adrian observed these changes during his weekly meetings with Clara. She reported on Lily's academic progress, which remained excellent, but also on her emotional development. He listened with his characteristic coldness, offering only curt nods of acknowledgement. Yet Clara noticed things he tried to hide, the way his jaw tightened when she mentioned Lily's nightmares decreasing, the brief flash of something in his eyes when she described the child's laughter. Lady Lily has asked about you, Your Grace, Clara said during their fourth weekly meeting. She wonders if you might join us for tea one afternoon. Nothing formal, simply a father spending time with his daughter. Adrian's expression hardened. That would be inappropriate. You are the governess. I am the Duke. There are boundaries that must be maintained. Boundaries, yes, Clara replied calmly. But walls, Your Grace, are a different matter entirely. Walls keep out enemies, but they also imprison those who build them. He had dismissed her curtly, but her words haunted him. That night, unable to sleep, he found himself walking past the nursery. Through the partially open door, he heard Clara's voice reading a story, heard Lily's delighted gasp at some plot development. He stood in the shadows, listening, and felt something twist painfully in his chest. When had he last read to his daughter? When had he last heard her laugh? The answer shamed him, and shame made him angry. He retreated to his study and poured himself a brandy, telling himself that sentiment was weakness, that distance was protection. Yet the walls he had built so carefully were beginning to show cracks. The crisis came in the fifth week, during an event Adrian could not avoid, the annual Ashford Manor Winter Ball. It was a tradition dating back generations, a grand affair that brought together the county's most prominent families. Adrian had considered cancelling it after Isabel's death, but his steward had convinced him that to do so would fuel gossip and damage the family's standing. So each year he endured it with grim determination, playing the role of gracious host while keeping everyone at arm's length. This year, however, Lady Beatrice had arrived from London with an agenda. She swept into Ashford Manor 2 days before the ball, bringing with her a whirlwind of energy and determination. At 40, she was a handsome woman, with Adrian's same grey eyes, but a warmth he had lost. She had been widowed young and had never remarried, preferring her independence and her role as London's most formidable hostess. Adrian, she announced, cornering him in his study, I have invited someone special to the ball. Lady Margaret Thornbury and her daughter Constance. Adrian's eyes narrowed. You are matchmaking, Beatrice. I have told you repeatedly that I have no interest in remarrying. Constance is a lovely girl, 22, accomplished, from an excellent family. Her father is the Earl of Thornbury, and she would make a perfect duchess. More importantly, Lily needs a mother. Lily has a governess who seems quite adequate to her needs. Beatrice's expression softened. Yes, Miss Whitmore is wonderful. I knew she would be. But Adrian, a governess is not a mother, and you cannot hide in this manner forever nursing your wounds. Isabel has been dead for 3 years. It is time to move forward. I am perfectly content as I am. You are perfectly miserable, and you are making your daughter miserable as well. At least meet Constance. If nothing comes of it, I will cease my interference. but give yourself a chance at happiness again." Adrian wanted to refuse, but he knew his sister would not relent. And perhaps, he thought with bitter cynicism, a marriage of convenience to a suitable woman would finally silence the gossips and provide Lily with a maternal figure. It would be a practical arrangement, nothing more. He would never again make the mistake of loving his wife. "Very well," he said coldly. "I will meet this paragon, but I make no promises." The night of the ball arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if winter itself had decided to grant a reprieve. Ashford Manor blazed with candlelight, its ballroom filled with the county's elite in their finest evening dress. Adrian stood near the entrance, receiving guests with mechanical courtesy, his expression as frozen as the ice sculptures that decorated the refreshment tables. Lady Margaret Thornbury arrived with her daughter precisely at 8 o'clock. Constance was indeed lovely, golden-haired, blue-eyed, with the porcelain complexion and practiced grace of a woman trained from birth to be a duchess. She curtsied perfectly, smiled demurely, and said all the right things. Adrian felt nothing. No attraction, no interest, not even mild curiosity. She was a beautiful automaton, and he recognized in her the same emptiness he saw in himself. Yet Beatrice was watching hopefully, and the assembled guests were whispering speculatively, and Adrian found himself leading Constance onto the dance floor for the opening waltz. She was an excellent dancer, her conversation pleasant and undemanding. She complimented the manner, expressed appropriate sympathy for his loss, and hinted delicately at her own desire for a home and family. "Your daughter must be a great comfort to you, Your Grace," she said, as they turned gracefully across the polished floor. "Lady Lily is well cared for," Adrian replied neutrally. "I understand you have recently employed a new governess. How progressive of you to allow such familiarity. I believe in a firmer hand with children myself. Discipline and structure are essential to proper development." Something in her tone, a hint of condescension perhaps, or casual cruelty, made Adrian stiffen. He thought of Clara's gentle patience, of Lily's transformation, of laughter in the nursery. "Miss Whitmore has proven most satisfactory," he said coolly. The waltz ended, and Adrian escorted Constance back to her mother. Other partners claimed her, and he retreated to the periphery of the ballroom, nursing a glass of wine and counting the hours until this ordeal would end. It was then that he saw Clara. She stood in the doorway of the ballroom, clearly not a guest, but drawn by curiosity, or perhaps by Lily, who had begged to watch the dancing from the gallery above. Clara wore the same modest grey dress she always wore, her hair in its neat chignon, utterly out of place among the silks and jewels of the assembled ladies. Yet there was a dignity in her bearing, a quiet grace that made the others seem somehow garish by comparison. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Clara smiled slightly, a smile of encouragement, as if she understood his discomfort and wished to offer silent support. Adrian felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and unwelcome. He looked away quickly, draining his wineglass. The evening progressed with excruciating slowness. Adrian danced with the required partners, made the necessary conversation, and played his role with cold precision. Constance claimed him for a second dance, and Beatrice beamed approvingly from her position near the refreshment table. It was during this second dance that disaster struck. Lady Pemberton, a notorious gossip with a tongue sharpened by years of boredom, had positioned herself near the dance floor with several other matrons. Her voice, pitched to carry, cut through the music like a knife. "I must say, Lady Thornbury, your Constance has made quite an impression on the Duke. Though one wonders if any woman could truly replace the late Duchess. Such a tragedy, her death, though there were rumours, were there not?" Adrian's steps faltered. Constance, oblivious, continued chattering about the decorations. Lady Pemberton continued, emboldened by wine and malice. "They say she was riding to meet someone when she fell. A lover, perhaps, And the Duke, poor man, discovered it all too late. No wonder he has become such a recluse. The humiliation must have been unbearable. The music seemed to fade. Adrian stopped dancing abruptly, his face draining of colour. Around him, conversations died as guests turned to stare. Constance looked up at him in confusion, then followed his gaze to Lady Pemberton, who had suddenly realized her words had been overheard. "Your Grace, the woman stammered, her face flushing. Adrian's voice, when he spoke, was like ice cracking. "You will leave my home. Immediately." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Lady Pemberton's husband rushed forward, apologizing profusely, but Adrian cut him off with a gesture. "Now!" As the mortified couple hurried toward the exit, Adrian became aware of the stares, the whispers, the avid curiosity on every face. They had all heard. They all knew. The carefully buried scandal had been exhumed, and he stood exposed before them all. The cuckolded husband, the fool who had loved and been betrayed. Constance touched his arm tentatively. "Your Grace, perhaps we should—" He shook her off, his control shattering. "Do not touch me." His voice was harsh, too loud. "Do not presume to offer comfort. You know nothing. None of you know anything." He was aware of making a scene, of confirming every whispered rumor, but he could not stop himself. 3 years of suppressed rage and humiliation came pouring out. "You come to my home. You eat my food. You dance in my ballroom, and you whisper about my shame. You pity me. You judge me. Well, I need neither your pity nor your judgment." Beatrice rushed forward, her face pale. "Adrian, please." But he was beyond reason. He turned and strode from the ballroom, leaving shocked silence in his wake. He heard Beatrice making apologies, heard the buzz of excited gossip beginning, but he did not care. He walked blindly through the corridors of his own home, a prisoner of his past, until he found himself in the darkened library. He stood there, shaking with rage and shame, and realized that the walls he had built had not protected him at all. They had merely delayed the inevitable moment when the world would see him as he truly was, broken, humiliated, and utterly alone. It was Clara who found him there an hour later. She entered quietly, carrying a lamp, and said nothing. She simply stood nearby, a silent presence, offering neither pity nor judgment. Just presence. "You should not be here," Adrian said hoarsely. "It is not proper propriety," Clara replied gently. "Seems rather insignificant at the moment, Your Grace. You are in pain. That is what matters." And for the first time in 3 years, Adrian Blackwood, Duke of Ashford, allowed himself to feel the full weight of his grief. Not for Isabel, whom he had learned to hate, but for the man he had been before betrayal had turned his heart to stone. He did not weep. He had forgotten how. But he stood in the darkness with this quiet governess nearby, and felt the first crack in the ice that had encased his soul. The morning after the disastrous ball dawned grey and cold, matching Adrian's mood perfectly. He had not slept, spending the night in his study with a bottle of brandy that remained mostly untouched. Clara had stayed with him for perhaps an hour, saying little, simply sitting in a chair near the fire while he stood at the window, wrestling with his demons. When she finally left, she had touched his arm briefly, a gesture of such simple compassion that it had nearly undone him completely. Now, in the harsh light of day, he faced the consequences of his outburst. By noon, half the county would know every detail. By evening, the story would reach London. The Duke of Ashford, who had maintained such rigid control for 3 years, had finally broken in spectacular fashion. Beatrice found him in his study at mid-morning. Her face was drawn with worry and exhaustion. "Adrian, we must talk. There is nothing to discuss. I made a fool of myself. The gossips have their entertainment. It is done. It is far from done." Beatrice sat without invitation, her hands folded in her lap. Lady Thornbury left at dawn with Constance. She made it quite clear that her daughter would not be associating with our family. Several other guests departed early as well, citing various excuses. Adrian laughed bitterly. How shocking! The scandal-tainted Duke is no longer suitable company. Adrian, please, this anger is destroying you. Isabel is dead. Her betrayal is in the past. You must find a way to move forward, or it will consume everything. Your happiness, your relationship with Lily, your very soul. My soul. Adrian's voice was harsh. I have no soul, Beatrice. Isabel took it with her when she died, along with my ability to trust, to feel, to hope. I am a hollow man playing at being a duke. That is all I have left. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. That is not true. I see glimpses of the brother I knew when you speak of Lily, when Miss Whitmore reports on her progress. There is still goodness in you, Adrian, still capacity for love. You have simply buried it so deeply that you have forgotten it exists. Love is a lie, a pretty fiction that leads only to pain. No, Beatrice said firmly. Isabel's love was a lie, but love itself, true love, honest love, that is real, and you deserve it whether you believe so or not. Adrian turned away, unable to bear the compassion in her eyes. What would you have me do? Pretend the past never happened? Open my heart again so it can be shattered anew? I would have you live, Adrian. Truly live, not merely exist. And I think... She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think Miss Whitmore has shown you that it is possible. Look at what she has done for Lily in mere weeks. The child is transformed, and you allowed her to sit with you last night. You accepted comfort from her. That is progress, whether you acknowledge it or not. Miss Whitmore is the governess, nothing more. Beatrice smiled sadly. If you truly believed that, you would not be so defensive. But I will not press the point. I am returning to London this afternoon. I think you need time alone, truly alone, to decide what kind of man you wish to be. The bitter recluse who drives away everyone who cares for him? Or the father Lily deserves? The brother I remember, the man who once believed in goodness? After Beatrice departed, Adrian found himself wandering the manor like a ghost. He passed the ballroom, where servants were cleaning up the remnants of the previous night's disaster. He walked through the portrait gallery, pausing before Isabel's painting. She stared down at him with her perfect beauty and empty eyes, and he felt nothing. Not love, not hate, not even anger anymore. Just a vast, echoing emptiness. It was in this state that Lily found him. She appeared in the gallery doorway, small and hesitant, with Clara standing protectively behind her. The child's grey eyes, so like his own, were wide with concern. "Papa," her voice was barely a whisper. "Are you unwell? Miss Clara said you had a difficult evening." Adrian stared at his daughter, this small person he had kept at such careful distance. She wore a blue dress that brought out the colour in her cheeks, and her golden hair was arranged in neat braids. She looked healthy, happy, so different from the pale, withdrawn child of 2 months ago. And it was not his doing. It was Clara's. "I am well enough, Lily," he said stiffly. "You should return to your lessons." But Lily did not retreat. Instead, she stepped forward, her small hands clasped before her. "Miss Clara says that sometimes people are sad, and that it is not wrong to be sad. She says that pretending not to feel things only makes the hurt worse." Adrian's gaze shifted to Clara, who stood quietly in the doorway. She met his eyes steadily, without apology. She had been teaching his daughter more than academics, it seemed. She had been teaching her emotional honesty, a lesson he himself had forgotten. "Miss Clara is very wise," he said, and was surprised to hear no sarcasm in his tone, only weary acknowledgement. Lily took another step closer. "Papa, I know you miss Mamma. I miss her too, even though I did not know her very well. But Miss Clara says that people we love never truly leave us. They live in our memories, in the lessons they taught us. And she says that it is possible to be sad about the past, but still find joy in the present." The child's words, so clearly rehearsed, yet delivered with such earnest sincerity, pierced through Adrian's defenses more effectively than any adult reasoning could have. He knelt down, bringing himself to Lily's eye level, something he could not remember ever doing before. "When did you become so wise, little one?" he asked, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Lily smiled tentatively. "Miss Clara teaches me many things. Not just reading and arithmetic, but how to be brave, how to hope. She says hope is like a candle in the darkness. It may be small, but it is enough to see by. Adrian looked up at Clara, who remained in the doorway. Her hazel eyes were bright with unshed tears, but she smiled at him. That same gentle, understanding smile that had begun to haunt his dreams. In that moment he realized that Beatrice had been right. Clara had breached his defenses, not through grand gestures or manipulation, but through simple, persistent kindness. She had shown him through her treatment of Lily what he had forgotten, that gentleness was not weakness, that compassion was not foolishness, that opening one's heart was not surrender but courage. "Thank you, Lily," he said quietly. "You have given me much to think about. Now go with Miss Clara. I believe you have lessons waiting." Lily curtsied and turned to leave, but at the doorway she paused and looked back. "Papa, Miss Clara is teaching me to paint this afternoon. Would you like to join us? You need not stay long, but I would like to show you what I have learned." Every instinct screamed at Adrian to refuse, to retreat to his study and his solitude. But he looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at Clara's encouraging presence, and found himself nodding. Perhaps for a short while. The joy that lit Lily's face was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. She ran to him, and before he could react, threw her small arms around his neck in an impulsive embrace. Adrian froze, his body rigid with shock. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with affection, so long since he had allowed himself to be vulnerable to another's emotions. Slowly, awkwardly, he raised his arms and returned the embrace. Lily was warm and solid and real, and she smelled of soap and watercolors and childhood innocence. Something inside him, something he had thought dead, stirred painfully to life. When Lily finally released him and skipped away, chattering excitedly to Clara about the painting she would show him, Adrian remained kneeling on the gallery floor. He looked up at Clara, who had witnessed this moment of weakness, and expected to see pity or triumph in her expression. Instead, he saw only quiet approval and something else, something that looked almost like pride. That afternoon, Adrian found himself in the nursery schoolroom, a place he had not entered since Lily was an infant. It was transformed from the austere chamber Miss Grimsby had maintained. Watercolor paintings decorated the walls. Childish but charming depictions of birds and flowers and landscapes. Books were scattered on tables, not in rigid order, but in the comfortable chaos of active use. A fire crackled cheerfully in the grate, and the room smelled of paint and paper and possibility. Lily sat at a small easel, her tongue caught between her teeth in concentration as she worked on a painting of a robin. Clara stood nearby, offering gentle guidance, her sleeves rolled up and a smudge of paint on her cheek. She looked younger like this, less the proper governess and more human, approachable, beautiful even, in an understated way that had nothing to do with fashion or artifice. "Papa!" Lily called when she noticed him. "Come see, Miss Clara taught me how to mix colors, to make the robin's breast the right shade of red." Adrian approached, feeling absurdly out of place in this warm, creative space. He examined Lily's painting with the same serious attention he would give a business contract. "It is very well done. You have captured the bird's posture admirably." "Do you paint, Your Grace?" Clara asked, her tone conversational rather than deferential. "I did once, as a boy. My tutor considered it frivolous, so I abandoned it." "That is a pity. Art is not frivolous. It is how we make sense of the world, how we express what words cannot capture." Clara gestured to an empty easel. "Perhaps you might try again. Lily would be delighted to have a painting companion." Adrian should have refused, should have cited pressing business, important correspondence, any of a dozen excuses. Instead, he found himself removing his coat, rolling up his shirt sleeves, and accepting the brush Clara offered him. She set up a simple, still life, a vase of winter greenery, and showed him how to mix the paints, her hands moving with practiced confidence. For an hour, Adrian painted. His technique was rusty, his results amateurish, But something in the act of creation, the focus required, the small decisions about color and form, quieted the constant turmoil in his mind. Lily chattered happily beside him, and Clara moved between them, offering suggestions, praising their efforts, creating an atmosphere of such comfortable domesticity that Adrian felt as if he had stepped into someone else's life. When the session ended, and Lily was sent to wash up for tea, Adrian found himself alone with Clara. She was cleaning brushes, her movements efficient and graceful. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, turning her chestnut hair to bronze. "Thank you," he said abruptly, "for what you have done for Lily, for what you attempted to do for me last night." Clara looked up, her hazel eyes warm. "You need not thank me, Your Grace. It is my privilege to teach Lily. She is a remarkable child, intelligent, sensitive, kind. She simply needed someone to see those qualities and nurture them. She needed what I could not give her, what I was too afraid to give her. Fear is not weakness, Your Grace. It is simply fear. What matters is what we do despite it." Clara set down the brushes and faced him directly. "You have been hurt terribly, betrayed by someone you trusted. It is natural to build walls, to protect yourself from further pain. But walls that keep out hurt also keep out joy, and life without joy is merely existence." "You sound like my sister." "Then your sister is a wise woman." Clara smiled. "Your Grace, I know it is not my place to speak so frankly, but I have watched you these past weeks. I have seen you struggle between the man you have become and the man you once were, and I truly believe, that the man you once were is still there, buried beneath grief and anger. He simply needs permission to emerge." Adrian stared at her. This woman who had entered his life so recently, yet had somehow become essential to it. She was right, and he knew it. The question was whether he had the courage to act on that knowledge. "And if I give myself that permission," he asked quietly, "what then? What if I open myself to feeling again and discover that I have forgotten how? What if the capacity for love has been burned out of me entirely?" Clara stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes, close enough to catch the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "Then we begin small, Your Grace. We begin with a father spending time with his daughter, with painting lessons and walks in the garden, with allowing yourself moments of peace. Love is not something that returns all at once. It is rebuilt, piece by piece, through small acts of courage and connection. And you would help me with this rebuilding? If you wish it, yes. Not because it is my duty as Lily's governess, but because," she paused, a faint blush colouring her cheeks, "because I believe you deserve happiness, Your Grace. And because I have come to care for both you and Lily more than is perhaps wise." The admission hung in the air between them, dangerous and thrilling. Adrian knew he should step back, should reassert the proper distance between employer and employee. Instead, he found himself reaching out and gently wiping the smudge of paint from her cheek. Her skin was soft and warm beneath his fingertips, and she did not pull away. "Clara," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I do not know if I can be the man you seem to believe I am, but I find myself wanting to try, for Lily, and perhaps for you." Her smile was like dawn breaking. "That, Your Grace, is all anyone can ask. The wanting to try. The rest will follow, in its own time." As Adrian left the nursery that evening, he felt something he had not experienced in 3 years, a fragile, tentative sense of hope. The walls around his heart had not crumbled, but they had developed cracks. And through those cracks, light was beginning to seep in. The weeks following Adrian's tentative emergence from isolation brought a transformation to Ashford Manor that the servants whispered about with cautious optimism. The Duke began taking breakfast with Lady Lily 3 mornings a week, sitting at the small table in the nursery, while his daughter chattered about her lessons and Clara poured tea with quiet grace. He joined their afternoon walks through the gardens, listening as Clara taught Lily the Latin names of plants, and the habits of winter wildlife. He even attended a small recital where Lily played a simple piece on the pianoforte, her fingers stumbling over the keys, but her face glowing with pride when he applauded. These were small steps, tentative gestures toward normalcy, but they represented a seismic shift in Adrian's carefully ordered world. He found himself thinking less about Isabel's betrayal and more about the present moment. The sound of Lily's laughter, the way Clara's eyes crinkled when she smiled, the unexpected peace he felt in their company. Yet the outside world had not forgotten the scandal of the winter ball. London society, ever hungry for gossip, had seized upon the Duke of Ashford's public breakdown with gleeful malice. The story had been embellished with each retelling until it bore little resemblance to truth. Some versions claimed he had physically attacked Lady Pemberton. Others suggested he had been drunk and incoherent. A few whispered that his late wife's ghost haunted the manor, driving him to madness. Beatrice wrote from London with alarming frequency. Her letters filled with accounts of the damage to the family's reputation. Invitations had been withdrawn. Old friends had become suddenly unavailable. The Blackwood name, once synonymous with dignity and honor, was now associated with scandal and instability. "You must return to society, Adrian," Beatrice wrote in her most recent letter. "You must show them that you are not the broken, volatile man they believe you to be. I am hosting a spring salon in 6 weeks, a gathering of artists, intellectuals, and select members of the ton. You must attend. Bring Lily if you wish, and Miss Whitmore to chaperone her. But you must come. It is the only way to begin repairing the damage." Adrian read the letter in his study, Clara sitting across from him. He had begun consulting her on matters beyond Lily's education, valuing her perspective and her calm rationality. She had become, without either of them quite acknowledging it, something more than a governess. Not quite a friend. The social gulf between them was too vast, but a confidant, a trusted advisor, a presence he had come to depend upon. "What do you think?" he asked, passing her the letter. Clara read it carefully, her brow furrowed in thought. "Lady Beatrice is right that you cannot hide forever. The longer you remain in seclusion, the more the gossip will fester. But, Your Grace, you must ask yourself, are you ready? Returning to society will mean facing judgment, enduring whispers, perhaps even direct confrontation. It will require strength and composure. I do not know if I possess either anymore." "I believe you do." Clara's voice was firm. "You have shown remarkable courage these past weeks. You have faced your fears regarding Lily, allowed yourself to be vulnerable, to feel again. That is far more difficult than facing a ballroom full of gossips." Adrian smiled wryly. "You have more faith in me than I have in myself. Then borrow mine until your own returns." Clara set down the letter and leaned forward, her expression earnest. "Your Grace, Adrian, you are not the man you were 3 years ago. Grief and betrayal changed you, but you are also not the hollow shell you believed yourself to be. You are a father learning to love his daughter, a man learning to hope again. That is who you will show them, not the broken duke, but the man who survived his breaking and emerged stronger." Her words stirred something in Adrian's chest, a warmth, a longing, a dangerous awareness of how much this woman had come to mean to him. She was beautiful in the lamplight, her hazel eyes bright with conviction, her lips slightly parted as she spoke. He wanted to reach across the desk and take her hand, to tell her that she was the reason he had found the courage to change, that her presence had become as necessary to him as breathing. But the gulf between them remained. She was the governess. He was the duke. To act on his feelings would be to abuse his position, to potentially ruin her reputation and future prospects. So he merely nodded and said, "Very well, we shall go to London, all 3 of us." The journey to London took 2 days, with an overnight stop at a coaching inn. Lily was beside herself with excitement, having never visited the capital. Clara maintained her usual composure, but Adrian noticed the way her eyes widened as they entered the city's bustling streets, the way she pressed her face to the carriage window to take in the sights. Beatrice's townhouse in Mayfair was elegant and welcoming, a stark contrast to Ashford Manor's austere grandeur. She greeted them with tears of joy, embracing Adrian fiercely before turning her attention to Lily and Clara. "Miss Whitmore," she said warmly, "I cannot thank you enough for what you have done for my family. You have worked a miracle." Clara blushed at the praise. "I have simply done my duty, Lady Beatrice. Lady Lily is a joy to teach." "Nonsense. You have done far more than duty required." Beatrice's knowing gaze shifted between Clara and Adrian, and a small smile played at her lips. "But come, you must all be exhausted. I have prepared rooms for you. The salon is in 4 days, which gives us time to prepare." Those 4 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Beatrice insisted on taking Clara shopping for a new dress, overriding her protests about propriety and expense. "You are attending as Lily's chaperone, but also as a guest," Beatrice declared. "You will not wear that grey governess dress to my salon. I will not hear another word about it." The result was a gown of deep emerald green that transformed Clara from a modest governess into a striking woman. When Adrian saw her in it for the first time, the evening of the salon, he felt as if he had been struck. The colour brought out the gold in her hazel eyes and the richness of her chestnut hair, which had been arranged in an elegant style that left soft tendrils framing her face. She looked uncertain, self-conscious, but to Adrian she was breathtaking. "You look beautiful," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Clara's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, Your Grace. I feel rather like an impostor. This is not my world." "Then we shall be impostors together," Adrian replied, offering his arm, "for I feel much the same." Beatrice's salon was already crowded when they arrived. The townhouse's drawing rooms had been opened up to accommodate perhaps 60 guests, a carefully curated mix of artists, writers, musicians, and select members of society known for their intellectual interests, rather than their adherence to rigid social conventions. It was, Adrian realized, a brilliant strategy. Here he would not face the judgmental matrons and gossip-hungry peers of traditional society, but rather people who valued conversation and ideas over scandal and status. Still, his entrance caused a noticeable stir. Conversations paused, heads turned, and Adrian felt the weight of curious stares. Lily, holding Clara's hand, pressed closer to the governess's side. Adrian straightened his shoulders, channeling every ounce of ducal authority he possessed, and walked into the room as if he owned it, which, in a sense, he did. He was the Duke of Ashford, regardless of scandal, and he would not cower. Beatrice materialized at his side, smoothly making introductions, a celebrated poet who wanted to discuss the Romantic movement, a painter who had recently returned from Italy, a philosopher who had published a controversial treatise on ethics. Adrian found himself drawn into conversations that engaged his mind rather than his title, discussions that reminded him of his university days when ideas mattered more than status. It was during a conversation about agricultural reform that Adrian noticed Clara across the room. She stood near the pianoforte with Lily, listening to a young musician play. But she was not alone. A man had approached her, tall, perhaps 30, with dark hair and an easy smile. He was speaking to her with obvious interest, and Clara was responding, her expression animated in a way Adrian rarely saw. An unfamiliar emotion twisted in Adrian's chest, jealousy, sharp, irrational, and undeniable. "That is Dr. Elias Reed," Beatrice murmured at his elbow, having followed his gaze. "A physician and scholar. He has recently returned from Edinburgh, where he studied new medical techniques. Quite brilliant by all accounts. And unmarried." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I did not ask for his biography." "No, but you were staring at him with an expression that suggested you wished to challenge him to a duel." Beatrice's tone was amused. "Adrian, If you have feelings for Miss Whitmore, you should acknowledge them. To yourself, if not to her. She is the governess. She is a gentlewoman of good family who has fallen on reduced circumstances. Her father was a respected clergyman, her education is excellent, and her character is beyond reproach. The only barrier between you is the one you have constructed in your own mind. The barrier is society itself. If I were to pursue her, she would be labelled a fortune hunter, an opportunist. Her reputation would be destroyed. Or, Beatrice countered, she would be seen as a woman of merit who captured the heart of a duke. It depends entirely on how the story is told. And Adrian, whether you acknowledge it or not, you are already halfway in love with her. Everyone can see it except apparently you. Adrian wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in his throat, because Beatrice was right. Somewhere between Clara's first day at Ashford Manor and this moment, she had become essential to him. He thought of her constantly, her smile, her wisdom, the way she tilted her head when listening to Lily, the compassion in her eyes when she looked at him. He had tried to tell himself it was gratitude, respect, admiration. But watching her laugh at something Dr. Reed said, seeing another man appreciate her intelligence and grace, Adrian could no longer lie to himself. He was in love with Clara Whitmore. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He had sworn never to love again, had built his entire existence around that vow. Yet here he stood, his heart racing at the sight of a woman in a green dress, jealous of a stranger's attention, desperate to cross the room and claim her as his own. Before he could act on the impulse, disaster struck from an unexpected quarter. Lady Constance Thornbury entered the salon on the arm of her mother. Beatrice's face went pale. "I did not invite them," she whispered urgently. "They must have heard about the salon and decided to attend uninvited. Adrian, I am so sorry." But it was too late. Constance had spotted him, and her beautiful face twisted with something ugly. Spite, perhaps, or wounded pride. She swept across the room, her mother trailing behind, and positioned herself directly in Adrian's path. "Your Grace," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "How unexpected to see you in society. I had heard you preferred the company of servants to your peers." The insult was clear, the reference to Clara unmistakable. Adrian felt rage building in his chest, but before he could respond, Clara herself appeared at his side. She had left Dr. Reed and crossed the room, Lily's hand still clasped in hers, and now she faced Constance with quiet dignity. "Lady Constance," Clara said calmly, "how kind of you to acknowledge his grace. Though I must correct a misapprehension, I am Lady Lily's governess, not a servant. There is a distinction, though perhaps it is too subtle for some to grasp." Constance's eyes flashed with anger. A governess is little better than a servant, certainly not fit company for a duke, no matter how familiar she may have become. The implication was clear, and the assembled guests gasped at the impropriety. Adrian stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "You will apologize to Miss Whitmore immediately, Lady Constance, or you will leave this house." "Apologize to her?" Constance laughed, a brittle sound. "Everyone knows what she is, Your Grace, a scheming woman who has used your daughter to worm her way into your affections. She is no better than my late wife." Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Is that what you were about to say? That Miss Whitmore is a manipulator, a deceiver? Allow me to enlighten you, Lady Constance. My wife was beautiful, titled, and utterly hollow. She married me for my fortune and betrayed me with my closest friend. Miss Whitmore, by contrast, is honest, compassionate, and has asked nothing of me but the opportunity to teach my daughter. If you cannot see the difference, then you are as empty as Isabel was." The silence in the room was absolute. Adrian had just publicly acknowledged his wife's betrayal, had defended Clara in terms that left no doubt about his regard for her. It was social suicide, a scandal that would eclipse even the Winter Ball disaster. But Adrian found he did not care. He turned to Clara, whose eyes were wide with shock, and spoke words he had never thought to say again. "Miss Whitmore, Clara, I apologize for exposing you to such vulgarity. You deserve better. You deserve—" He paused, then made a decision that would change everything. "You deserve to be honored, not insulted. And if society cannot see your worth, then society is blind." He took her hand, raised it to his lips and kissed it, a gesture of respect and unmistakable courtship. The room erupted in whispers, but Adrian heard none of it. He saw only Clara's face, the tears gathering in her eyes, the tremulous smile on her lips. "Your Grace," she whispered. "Adrian, what have you done?" "What I should have done weeks ago," he replied. "I have chosen you, if you will have me." The aftermath of Adrian's public declaration was immediate and tumultuous. Lady Constance fled the salon in tears, her mother following with furious indignation. The remaining guests erupted into excited conversation, some scandalized, others delighted by the dramatic turn of events. Beatrice, ever the skilled hostess, quickly redirected attention by calling for music and refreshments. But the damage, or perhaps the triumph, was done. By morning all of London would know that the Duke of Ashford had publicly defended his daughter's governess and declared his regard for her in terms that could only be interpreted as romantic. Clara stood frozen, her hand still tingling from Adrian's kiss, her mind reeling. Around her she felt the weight of stares, curious, judgmental, speculative. Lily pressed against her side, confused by the tension, but instinctively seeking comfort. Adrian remained beside her, his posture protective, his expression daring anyone to offer further insult. Dr. Elias Reed approached, his intelligent eyes moving between Adrian and Clara with understanding. "Your Grace, Miss Whitmore," he said with a slight bow, "I believe the young lady might benefit from some fresh air. The terrace, perhaps." It was a gracious exit, and Clara seized it gratefully. She allowed Adrian to escort her and Lily through the French doors onto Beatrice's terrace, where the cool evening air provided relief from the stifling atmosphere inside. Lily immediately went to examine the potted plants, giving the adults a moment of relative privacy. "Adrian," Clara began, her voice shaking slightly, "what you did in there, it was noble but reckless. You have made me the subject of scandal. By tomorrow I will be labeled a fortune hunter, an adventuress who seduced her employer. My reputation will be destroyed." "Then I will marry you," Adrian said simply, "and your reputation will be that of the Duchess of Ashford." Clara's breath caught. "You cannot be serious. You barely know me. We have known each other mere months. And you swore. You told me yourself that you would never love again, never trust another woman." "I was wrong." Adrian took her hands in his grey eyes intense in the lamplight spilling from the drawing room. "Clara, I have been wrong about so many things. I thought isolation would protect me from pain. I thought coldness would shield my heart. I thought I could live the rest of my life as a hollow shell, going through the motions of existence without truly living. And then you arrived at Ashford Manor with your quiet wisdom and your gentle strength, and you showed me, through your treatment of Lily, through your patience with me, that I was not dead inside, that I could still feel, still hope, still love. Adrian, please, let me finish." His grip on her hands tightened. "I know this is sudden. I know I'm asking you to take an enormous risk, but Clara, I am in love with you. Not with some idealized version of you, but with the real woman, the one who gets paint on her cheeks and reads adventure stories with dramatic voices and believes that hope is a candle in the darkness. I love your compassion, your intelligence, your courage, and I believe, I hope, that you might feel something for me as well." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Of course I feel something for you. I have tried not to, tried to maintain proper distance, but Adrian, you have made it impossible. When I see you with Lily, when I watch you struggle to open your heart again, when you look at me as you are looking at me now, how could I not love you?" The admission hung between them, precious and fragile. Adrian released one of her hands to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Then marry me, Clara, not because scandal demands it, not because society expects it, but because we have found something rare and precious in each other. Because together we can build a life based on honesty and respect and genuine affection. Because I want to wake beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. Because I want to give Lily the mother she deserves and you the position that reflects your true worth." "And if I say yes," Clara whispered, "if I accept?" "We will face opposition, Adrian. Your peers will say I trapped you. My former employers will whisper that I was always scheming for this. We will be scrutinized, judged, gossiped about endlessly. Then let them talk. I have spent 3 years caring too much about what society thinks. I am done with that. The only opinions that matter are ours, and Lily's." He glanced at his daughter, who was watching them with wide, hopeful eyes. "What do you think, little one? Would you like Miss Clara to stay with us always? Not as your governess, but as your mother." Lily's face lit up with joy so pure it was almost painful to witness. "Truly, Papa, Miss Clara would be my mamma. If she agrees, yes." The child ran to Clara and threw her arms around her waist. "Please say yes, Miss Clara. Please, I love you so much, and Papa loves you, and we could be a real family." Clara looked down at Lily's upturned face, then at Adrian's earnest expression, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. She had spent 8 years as a governess, always on the periphery of other people's families, never quite belonging. She had resigned herself to a life of service, of watching other people's happiness from a distance, but here was a chance at something more, a family of her own, a man who saw her true worth, a child who already held her heart. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Adrian, I will marry you." Adrian pulled her into his arms, heedless of propriety or the guests who might be watching from the windows. He held her close, his face buried in her hair, and Clara felt the tremor that ran through him, relief, joy, perhaps even disbelief that she had accepted. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You have made me happier than I ever thought possible," he said hoarsely. "I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never regret this decision." The next days were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. News of the engagement spread through London with predictable speed, generating reactions that ranged from scandalized disapproval to romantic approval. The older, more conservative members of the ton were horrified that a duke would marry so far beneath his station. But younger society members, influenced by the romantic movement's emphasis on love over duty, found the story enchanting. The grieving duke rescued from despair by the virtuous governess. Beatrice was ecstatic, immediately taking charge of wedding preparations with the efficiency of a military general. "We must move quickly," she declared. "A long engagement will only give the gossips more time to spread poison. 6 weeks. That is all the time we need for a proper wedding." Clara found herself swept up in a world she had only observed from a distance. Fittings for a wedding dress and trousseau, meetings with florists and caterers, discussions of guest lists and seating arrangements. It was overwhelming and occasionally terrifying. But Adrian remained a constant presence, his hand finding hers whenever she seemed anxious, his quiet support anchoring her. The most difficult moment came when they visited Ashford Manor to make arrangements for Clara's transition from governess to duchess. As they walked through the portrait gallery, Clara paused before Isabel's painting. The late duchess stared down at her with cold beauty, and Clara felt a chill of inadequacy. "She was so lovely," Clara said quietly. "So perfect. How can I possibly—" "She was a lie," Adrian interrupted firmly. He stood beside Clara, looking up at his first wife's portrait with an expression of weary resignation rather than pain. "Beautiful, yes, but hollow. She married me for my title and fortune, not for love. She betrayed me without remorse. You, Clara, are everything she was not, honest, kind, genuine. You love Lily. You see me not as a duke, but as a man. That is worth more than all of Isabel's beauty. Do you still love her? Clara asked, needing to know. Adrian considered the question carefully. I loved who I thought she was, but that woman never existed. She was a fiction, a performance. When I discovered the truth, that love died. What remained was anger and grief, not for her, but for my own foolishness, for the years I wasted on someone who never valued me. But Clara, what I feel for you is entirely different. It is based on truth, on knowing you as you truly are, and loving every part of that truth. That is real love. That is lasting love. Clara turned to him, rising on her toes to kiss him gently. It was their first real kiss, tender and sweet, full of promise. When they parted, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. I am going to have that portrait removed, he said. This gallery should hold only people who matter to our family's future, not ghosts from the past. The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the chapel at Ashford Manor. It was a smaller affair than a duke's wedding typically warranted. Only close family and friends, perhaps 50 guests in total. Adrian had insisted on intimacy over spectacle, wanting the day to be about their union rather than social display. Clara wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with Lily serving as her attendant in a matching dress of pale blue. Beatrice wept throughout the ceremony, as did several of the servants who had witnessed Clara's transformation of the household. Dr. Elias Reed attended, having become a friend to both Clara and Adrian, his earlier romantic interest gracefully redirected into warm friendship. As Adrian slipped the ring onto Clara's finger and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and sure. Gone was the cold, broken man who had interviewed her in the library months ago. In his place stood someone warmer, more open, capable of vulnerability and love. Clara's own vows were spoken through tears of joy, her heart so full she thought it might burst. When the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian kissed her with a tenderness that made the small congregation sigh with approval. Lily cheered, and the chapel filled with applause and laughter. The wedding breakfast was held in Ashford Manor's dining room, which had been decorated with spring flowers and filled with warm candlelight. Toasts were offered, Beatrice speaking eloquently about love's power to heal and transform, Dr. Reed offering witty observations about the unexpected paths life takes, even the normally reserved Mr. Pemberton raising his glass to the new Duchess. But the most touching moment came when Lily stood, her small face serious, and raised her own glass of lemonade. "I want to toast my new mamma," she said, her voice clear and confident. "Miss Clara, I mean Mamma, you taught me that it is brave to hope, that it is strong to be kind, that love is not weakness but the greatest strength of all. You saved Papa from his sadness and me from my loneliness. You made us a family. I love you so much." Clara rose from her seat and embraced Lily, both of them crying now, while Adrian watched with an expression of such profound contentment that Beatrice had to dab at her own eyes again. As the celebration continued into the evening, Adrian and Clara slipped away to the terrace where they had first walked together months ago. The spring air was mild, scented with blooming flowers, and the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Are you happy?" Adrian asked, pulling Clara close. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied, resting her head against his chest. "When I came to Ashford Manor, I thought I was simply taking another governess position. I never dreamed I would find a family, a home, a love like this. I never dreamed I would love again," Adrian admitted. "After Isabel, I thought my heart was permanently closed. But you, Clara, you showed me that the heart is more resilient than I knew, that it can heal, can open again, can love even more deeply the second time, because it understands the value of what it has found." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge, both marveling at the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. Inside the manor, they could hear music and laughter, the sounds of celebration, of life being lived fully and joyfully. "What happens now?" Clara asked. "We will still face gossip, still encounter those who disapprove of our marriage." "Now," Adrian said, tilting her face up to kiss her softly. "We live. We raise Lily together. We fill this house with warmth and laughter instead of coldness and silence. We show society that love based on genuine respect and affection is stronger than any marriage based on title and fortune. And we prove every single day that choosing each other was the best decision either of us ever made." Clara smiled, her heart full of hope and joy. "Then let us begin, Your Grace. Let us begin our life together." "Adrian," he corrected gently. "Just Adrian. Always Adrian to you." "Then let us begin, Adrian, my husband, my love." And as they kissed beneath the emerging stars, both knew that they had found something rare and precious. A second chance at happiness, a love built on truth and trust, and a future bright with possibility. 6 months had passed since Clara Whitmore became the Duchess of Ashford, and the transformation of both the manor and its inhabitants was nothing short of remarkable. The once austere estate now rang with life and warmth. Servants no longer moved through the corridors with fearful silence, but went about their duties with cheerful efficiency. The drawing rooms, previously shrouded and unused, were opened and filled with fresh flowers. Music drifted from the pianoforte in the evenings. Laughter, genuine, unrestrained laughter, echoed through halls that had known only grief for too long. Clara had approached her new role as Duchess with the same thoughtful intelligence she had brought to teaching. She did not attempt to erase Isabel's memory entirely. That would have been both impossible and cruel. But she quietly reshaped the household to reflect warmth and welcome rather than cold formality. She consulted with the housekeeper about the servants' needs, improved their working conditions, and treated each member of the staff with respect and kindness. The result was a household that ran smoothly not through fear, but through genuine loyalty and affection for their mistress. Adrian watched his wife's graceful navigation of her new position with profound admiration and deepening love. She had taken to her duties as Duchess with natural dignity, hosting small dinner parties that brought together interesting minds rather than merely impressive titles. She had begun charitable work in the surrounding villages, establishing a school for tenant farmers' children and organizing relief for families in need. The local gentry, initially skeptical of the former governess-turned-duchess, found themselves won over by her genuine compassion and lack of pretension. But it was in her role as mother to Lily that Clara truly shone. The child had blossomed under her care, growing from a withdrawn, anxious girl into a confident, joyful young lady. Lily's education continued, but now it was balanced with play, with creativity, with the simple pleasures of childhood. She had friends now, daughters of neighboring families whom Clara invited for afternoon visits. She rode her pony through the estate with fearless enthusiasm. She painted and read and explored the world with the curiosity of a child who felt safe and loved. On this particular autumn morning, Adrian stood at his study window watching Clara and Lily in the garden below. They were collecting fallen leaves, Lily chattering excitedly about the different colors, while Clara listened with patient attention. The sight filled Adrian with a contentment so profound it was almost painful. This was what he had been missing for so long. Not just love, but the everyday intimacy of family life, the small moments of connection that gave meaning to existence. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. Mr. Pemberton entered carrying a letter. "Your Grace, this has just arrived from London, from Lady Beatrice." Adrian opened the letter, scanning its contents with growing amusement. His sister wrote with her characteristic enthusiasm about the upcoming season, about various social events, and, most significantly, about the complete reversal in society's opinion of his marriage. "My dear brother," Beatrice wrote, "you will be pleased to know that you and Clara are now the toast of London." The romantic story of the grieving Duke and the virtuous governess has captured everyone's imagination. Lady Pemberton, yes, the same woman whose gossip caused such trouble, has been quite thoroughly ostracized for her cruelty. while you and Clara are invited everywhere. The young ladies all sigh over your love story, and the young gentlemen are suddenly interested in hiring pretty governesses. It is all rather absurd, but I thought you would enjoy knowing that society has decided to approve of what it cannot prevent. You must both come to London for the season. It is time to claim your place together, not as scandal, but as triumph." Adrian smiled, folding the letter. Society's approval or disapproval had ceased to matter to him months ago, but he knew it would please Clara to be accepted, to no longer feel the weight of judgment and speculation. He would discuss it with her that evening. The day progressed with the comfortable rhythm that had become their norm. Adrian attended to estate business, meeting with his steward and tenant farmers about the harvest and winter preparations. Clara managed household affairs and spent time with Lily on her lessons. They took luncheon together as a family, a practice Adrian had instituted shortly after the wedding, sharing the events of their morning and making plans for the afternoon. "Papa," Lily said, her eyes bright with excitement, "Mamma says we might visit the village fair tomorrow. There will be jugglers and musicians and a puppet show. May we go, please?" Adrian looked at his daughter's eager face, then at Clara's gentle smile, and felt his heart swell with love. A year ago, he would have dismissed such a request as frivolous. Now he understood that these simple pleasures were what made life worth living. "Of course we may go," he said, "all three of us. I have not seen a puppet show in 30 years. It is time I remedied that." Lily squealed with delight and launched into an excited description of all the things she hoped to see. Clara caught Adrian's eye across the table, her expression full of warmth and approval, and he felt that now familiar surge of gratitude that she had entered his life. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with a story and a kiss, Adrian and Clara retired to their private sitting room. It was a cozy space that Clara had created, filled with comfortable furniture, books, and personal touches that made it feel like a sanctuary. A fire crackled in the grate, and Clara curled up beside Adrian on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. "I received a letter from Beatrice today," Adrian said, stroking Clara's hair absently. "She wants us to come to London for the season. Apparently, we have gone from scandal to romantic triumph in society's estimation." Clara was quiet for a moment, considering. "And what do you think? Do you wish to go?" "I think," Adrian said carefully, "that I no longer care what society thinks. But I also think that you deserve to take your rightful place as the Duchess of Ashford, to be celebrated rather than whispered about. If you wish to go, we shall go. If you prefer to remain here, we shall remain. The choice is yours." Clara lifted her head to look at him, her hazel eyes thoughtful. A year ago, the idea of being presented to society as a duchess would have terrified me. I would have felt like an imposter, certain that everyone could see through me to the governess beneath. But now, she paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "Now I know who I am. I am your wife, Lily's mother, the Duchess of Ashford, not because of my birth or my title, but because of the life we have built together. Society's approval is pleasant, but it is not necessary for my happiness." "You have become very wise, Your Grace," Adrian teased gently. "I had an excellent teacher," Clara replied, kissing him softly. "A man who taught me that true strength lies in vulnerability, that love is not weakness but courage, that it is possible to heal from even the deepest wounds if you are willing to try." Adrian pulled her closer, marveling at how completely this woman had transformed his life. "I was a broken man when you came to Ashford Manor. Bitter, cold, convinced that I was beyond redemption. You saved me, Clara, you and Lily both." "No," Clara said firmly. "You saved yourself, Adrian. I simply showed you that you were worth saving. The courage to change, to open your heart again, that came from within you. I am merely grateful that I was there to witness it." They sat in comfortable silence watching the fire, both reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of peace and contentment. Outside, autumn rain began to fall, pattering against the windows, but inside they were warm and safe and together. "There is something I have not told you," Clara said eventually, her voice soft with emotion. "Something I have been waiting for the right moment to share." Adrian felt a flutter of concern. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong, quite the opposite." Clara took his hand and placed it gently on her abdomen. "Adrian, we are going to have a child. I'm certain of it now. By spring, Lily will have a brother or sister." For a moment, Adrian could not speak. He stared at Clara, his mind struggling to process this unexpected news. A child, their child, a new life created from their love, a symbol of hope and new beginnings. When he finally found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "Clara, are you certain? You are well? You need rest. Care?" She laughed, the sound like music. "I am perfectly well, and yes, I am certain. I wanted to be sure before I told you. Are you happy about this?" "Happy." Adrian pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were infinitely precious. "Clara, I am overwhelmed, terrified, joyful beyond measure. A child, our child." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was not a good father to Lily in her early years. I was too consumed by my own pain to see hers. But I swear to you, I will be better with this child. I will be present from the beginning. I will love them as they deserve to be loved." "I know you will," Clara said, wiping away a tear that had escaped down his cheek. "You have already proven yourself capable of profound change and growth. This child will be blessed to have you as a father." The news of Clara's pregnancy brought fresh joy to Ashford Manor. Lily was ecstatic at the prospect of becoming a sister, already planning all the things she would teach the baby. The servants celebrated with genuine happiness, for they had come to love their Duchess and were invested in the family's happiness. Even the usually reserved Mr. Pemberton was seen smiling as he went about his duties. As autumn deepened into winter, Adrian found himself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation of the past year. He thought of the man he had been, cold, bitter, locked in a prison of his own making. He thought of the vow he had made never to love again, the walls he had built around his heart, and he marveled at how completely those walls had crumbled, not through force, but through the gentle, persistent kindness of one remarkable woman. One evening, as they prepared for bed, Clara found Adrian standing before the window of their chamber, staring out at the frost-covered grounds. She came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how wrong I was," Adrian replied. "About everything. I thought love was weakness, that opening my heart would only lead to more pain. I thought the safest course was to feel nothing, to exist rather than live. But Clara, you showed me that the opposite is true. Love is not weakness. It is the greatest strength we possess. It is what gives life meaning, what makes us fully human. And yes, love makes us vulnerable to pain. But it also opens us to joy, to connection, to all the beauty that life offers." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I vowed never to love again, and I kept that vow for 3 years. But then you came into my life, and you shattered my defenses with your unexpected kindness. You taught me that it is possible to heal, to hope, to love again, and to love more deeply the second time because I understand its value. You gave me back my daughter, gave me a family, gave me a reason to live rather than merely exist. And now you are giving me a child, a new life, a fresh beginning. How can I ever thank you for all of that?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You do not need to thank me, Adrian. Loving you, being loved by you, that is its own reward. We saved each other, I think. You gave me a home, a family, a place to belong. You saw past the governess to the woman beneath and valued her for who she truly was. We are partners in this life, equals in this love. That is all the thanks either of us needs." Adrian kissed her then, a kiss full of tenderness and passion and profound gratitude. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers and whispered, "I love you, Clara Blackwood, Duchess of Ashford, today, tomorrow, and for all the days of my life." "And I love you, Adrian," Clara replied. "My husband, my heart, my home." Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the grounds of Ashford Manor in pristine white. But inside, in the warmth of their chamber, the Duke and Duchess of Ashford held each other close and looked toward the future with hope and joy. They had both been broken by their pasts, both wounded by loss and betrayal. But together, they had found healing. Together, they had discovered that love, true, honest, courageous love, was worth every risk, every vulnerability, every moment of fear. The Duke had vowed never to love again, but a governess's unexpected kindness had shattered his defenses, opened his heart, and shown him that life's greatest treasures often come from the most unexpected sources. And in learning to love again, he had not only saved himself, but had created a family built on truth, respect, and genuine affection, a family that would endure for generations to come. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, both Adrian and Clara knew that they had found something rare and precious, a love that had transformed them both, a partnership that made them stronger together than they could ever be apart, and a future bright with promise and possibility. The story that had begun with grief and isolation had become one of hope and connection. The man who had locked his heart away had learned to open it again, and the governess who had expected nothing more than another position had found a home, a family, and a love that would last a lifetime. In the end, that was the greatest triumph of all. If you enjoyed this story of love, redemption, and second chances, I would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to subscribe to the channel and click the like button. Your support helps these stories reach more listeners around the world. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. What was your favorite moment in Adrian and Clara's journey? Was it when Adrian first allowed himself to paint with Lily, the dramatic confrontation at Beatrice's salon, or perhaps the tender moment when Clara revealed she was expecting a child? And please tell me, from which corner of the world are you listening to this story? Are you hearing it from a cozy room in North America, a quiet evening in Europe, a sunny afternoon in Australia, or somewhere else entirely? I'm always amazed by how far these tales of the heart can travel, connecting us across continents and cultures through our shared love of storytelling. If you have suggestions for future stories or themes you'd like to explore, please share them in the comments. Your feedback and engagement mean everything and help shape the stories I bring to you. Thank you for joining Adrian, Clara, and Lily on their journey from darkness to light, from isolation to love, from brokenness to healing. May their story remind you that it is never too late to open your heart again, that kindness has the power to transform lives, and that love, true, courageous love, is always worth the risk. Until our next story together, take care and remember, even in our darkest moments, hope remains, a candle in the darkness, small perhaps, but bright enough to see by. Subscribe, like, and share your thoughts below. I'll see you in the next tale.